welcome back to my channel. Welcome to In Conversation with Christine. Today I'm in conversation with Lewis Brackpool. Lewis is an independent journalist, and we're going to be discussing how to navigate the world of journalism in a time of censorship and in a time where it seems increasingly hard to speak out against certain narratives. So Lewis, thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. Lewis, I'm going to jump straight into it, and I want to sort of build a picture for who exactly you are. So, can you tell us sort of where you're from, where you grew up,
Sure.
your early life? What did you do in school, and what led you to what you're doing today?
Okay. So obviously I'm Lewis. I grew up in a town called Crawley, which is quite a rough town in the south of England. I have been doing journalism for about 3 years. Never ever was an interest of mine throughout my life. I was pretty asleep, as they say, for most of my life in terms of politics. But I was studying politics during school, and I was a communist. But now I've taken myself out of that hole, and yeah, obviously not that anymore. But yeah, I fell into this world of journalism, this world of media, through 2020, when things became really, really tough for a lot of people, and just noticing certain narratives and certain things that weren't right, especially during 2020, but even before that, with Trump, with Brexit. So all of these things, all of these earthquakes in the political sphere, that sort of shaped my politics, my views. And now, I mean, some people call me a cynic, but I like to use the word skeptical.
Right.
And I think it's very important now in journalism, where you have, well, the mainstream media or mainstream journalists that aren't asking the right questions to the right people. So that's where I come in.
Right. So what was you doing in school? Where did you sort of see your career going when you were in school? What is it that you wanted to do?
So I was studying music and music production, and I was a DJ as well for a long time. So I was a completely different lifestyle
Mhm.
to what it is now. But yeah, I wanted to do music. I wanted to make computer music. I was making house music, garage, all of that sort of stuff. And yeah, I don't know. It just kind of really, I couldn't sustain myself in that sort of career. And I thought, okay, well, I'll start looking for a proper job, as they say.
Mhm.
And I ended up in travel then after
Okay.
that, and started selling holidays for TUI, or was Thompson.
Oh, okay.
And then I became a
I didn't
flight
realize that
attendant.
travel agents were still a thing. I literally
Yeah.
haven't seen a travel agents for years and years. I
Yeah.
think the last time I saw one was probably like 2008, when I
Oh,
used to
wow.
go to travel agents with my parents, and since then, I didn't realize that they were still going. I thought it was
Still
all
going.
online.
Yeah, still going. So I was like, I think I was 21, 22 at the time when I was doing it. And then I became a flight attendant
Oh, wow.
for like 2, 3 years. Yeah, just giving out chicken and beef on metal tubes in the air. It was really weird. Done that for a couple of years. COVID hit, got made redundant because of COVID.
Oh,
And
wow.
now we're here.
So you fully lost your job to
Yeah,
COVID. Yeah, I
yeah.
was in a similar position. I was in hospitality, so it was
Oh,
no,
wow. Yeah, hit.
no furlough or nothing. Just you're out, you're done. Sorry.
That's brutal. That is brutal.
I feel your pain there. Great. Okay. And did you go to uni at all?
So I studied music
Oh,
production.
that was at uni.
That was at a college, but it was a uni course. It was very
Right. Okay.
weird. But I didn't have the uni experience of, freshers or any of that stuff.
No, me neither, because of COVID.
Oh,
I
wow.
went to uni and COVID hit, so
Oh, wow.
I
Okay.
came out of uni with literally just a piece of paper.
Wow.
I still can't believe that they didn't refund us for those years. Like, I really was not at university.
People are so robbed. Honestly, people were so robbed of their education during that
Mm,
time. Like nobody got to experience like hardly anything of what university has to give. So, social skills,
no.
actually living outside of like your home, and like, but really sort of taking in the social aspects of it, because it's very
Mm.
important.
Yeah,
That's my.
I was lucky that I was moved out because I did
Mhm.
private renting instead of accommodation because the thought of having to live in a house with six people who
I've
No,
done that before,
I've
even
heard are
more
quite
recently.
messy. It's just not for me. I'd rather just have my own space. So
Yeah.
that was cool. But I guess what I didn't anticipate was obviously COVID hit. I
Yeah.
lost my job. And other than my job, I wasn't, obviously, I hadn't gone to uni, I hadn't made any friends. So I was
Mm.
60, 70 miles away from all of my friends, family. And suddenly I'm, 19, 20 and on my own,
Yeah.
locked in a little studio flat for however long. But I'm really glad it happened because I think I sort of woke up to a lot of things around the
Yeah.
same time. I
Yeah.
remember when the pandemic hit and I was at my mum and dad's and I just got to my mum and dad's from my flat. So my flat was in Watford. My parents live in the south in Croydon. And I just got to my mum and dad's. My mum goes, Boris has said we've got a lockdown. I went,
Mm,
what do you mean Boris has said we've got a lockdown? And she goes, you've got to decide if you're going to stay here, if you're going to go back to your flat. I
yeah.
went, hang on a minute. So you're telling me that the Prime
Mm,
Minister has come on TV and told you that you can't leave your house and you're just going to say, okay? She's like,
yeah.
Christine, it's not a joke. The whole country.
Yeah.
And as soon as I heard that, in my gut, something said, feel,
That up.
this
No.
doesn't feel. And I decided, I went, well, I'm not going to pay rent on a flat if I'm not going to be there. And given my mum's reaction to the pandemic, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm really not staying here because
I don't
she's
know.
probably going to have a meltdown over all of this. But
Oh.
I I went back and I remember the whole drive back. It was the first time I'd ever seen the M25 empty.
Mm,
Which is really weird. I had this really weird apocalyptic kind of deserted feeling, and all of the trucks were on like the hard shoulder. Everything was like parked up and came to a stop, and I just couldn't fathom that it was actually happening, you
mm,
know. But I'm sure a lot of people had a similar experience. But I think it's really important that we don't forget our experiences
I agree.
during the pandemic because I think life's gone back to normal now. And my dad mentioned to me the other day when the planes started going back up again. And I
Hmm.
don't know if you had this, but during COVID, obviously all the planes and everything stopped.
Yeah.
When the planes went back in the sky, you noticed it was like, oh, I can hear a plane because you hadn't heard them for so long. And I think it's really important that people remember that feeling of just how warped
Mm.
everything become. And the amount of power really that the government had to really tell people, you can't leave your home. But we're gonna get into that. What I wanted to ask was, how did you become a journalist? Did you do any kind of training for that? Or was it purely just an idea that you had and that you sort of delved into yourself?
So when I lost my job as a flight attendant and everything was grounded and we weren't working for a long time and everyone was stuck to the news, I started to notice things weren't right. So I started to watch alternative news and I started to see other people talking about what was happening, people over in America, such as Stephen Crowder,
Right.
and over here, people like Paul Joseph Watson and various others who were talking specifically about the pandemic and what was happening. And I was given a totally different narrative to what the mainstream media was doing. And I was watching it going, okay, there's something going on here. So I started to digest it. And then when I got the call I'm sorry, Lewis, you've been let go. We're making cutbacks, and they cut back, I think, over three-quarters of the entire workforce. So like 75% of people lost their job, and I was one of them. And I decided at that moment, I'm going to make videos. Literally on the same day I got fired, I was like, okay, I'm going to make videos. I want to talk about what's happening in the world. So I set up a YouTube channel and just started making content. And, one thing leads to another. You start to meet people, you start to talk to people, interact with people, you start to build a network, you start to read more books, which I
Mhm.
started to do. You start to gain all this knowledge, you start to keep yourself up to date within the news cycle. And it just sort of happened. I just sort of fell into it. So I must admit, I never had any training. I never done anything. And I started to then attend the anti-lockdown protests
Yep.
and started to film there and started to ask people questions and just to get people to tell me how they were feeling about what was happening because the media wasn't doing that. So it left a kind of a chasm or like a vessel or something for me to just go in and say, well, how do you feel? Like, why isn't the mainstream media talking to you? Why aren't they asking you questions? Why aren't we getting this side of the story as opposed to what they're telling us? And then from there, it started to expand. And 3 years later, yeah, I've just been writing. I've been really just putting myself out there on podcasts. I've been talking about agendas, culture, and sort of moving into other directions as well as what I was originally talking about during the lockdown years, which, it still isn't over. It really still isn't over. The narrative hasn't quite closed. We're
No.
still being fed lies. So it's still important to sometimes obviously bring it up, but not all the time because people get fatigued.
Of course, of course. I think especially after the restrictions started lifting,
Yeah,
everyone was very much sort of, I don't even want to think about this time ever
sure.
again. And I get that. Obviously we'd just had it non-stop for, almost 3 years. But yeah, like you say, I do think it's important not to forget that feeling, because that's, if you forget that feeling, then you run the risk of being put in a similar position again. Can you tell me sort of, what's some exciting things that you've done then in these last 3 years? Where have you been? Who have
Yeah.
you met?
So after making a YouTube channel, I then decided, okay, well, I want to work for a company. I want to get some more experience. So I joined a company called Rebel News, based in Canada, wanted a UK correspondent. And so I joined that and I filled that gap. And that took me everywhere. I was going everywhere from not only just domestically within the UK to speak to lots of different people and to run stories. I went to the Netherlands and focused on the Dutch farmer rebellion when that happened, when the farmers were actually the government was intruding upon the farmers in their rural land, and they wanted to regulate more of what they could and couldn't use, and in fact, even buy out a lot of the farms over in the Netherlands
Okay.
because you wanted to control it. So I went over there. Same thing. The mainstream media didn't want to have anything to do with the rural people of the Netherlands. So I went over there, just done a whole like we done documentary we done sorry a documentary, we done reports over there, we done protests, we done vox pops, we were in the middle of highways just filming farmers and their tractors completely stopping traffic, and it was just a crazy time. So that was very memorable. That was one of my sort of favorite times out of the past couple of years. But I also spoke a lot about the World Economic Forum. I traveled to Davos in Switzerland to talk or to go to the World Economic Forum outside, not
Okay.
inside, but just to either doorstep elites or to of course just show people at home what it's like to be there, because we always see the conferences, we always see what they talk about, but what's it actually like to be there? What's
Mm.
it actually like to be an outsider, to actually do some journalism outside of the World Economic Forum? So with Rebel, I went over there with a team, and we just covered like what was happening. There was protests there, weirdly, and there was just people just walking around with name tags that everyone could see who everyone was, and they had colored graded tags which showed you who was like higher up in the chain, if that made sense.
Mhm.
So it's just a fascinating it was just a fascinating world that I'm completely against, obviously. And
So for the people in the audience, I'm sure everyone is pretty much aware of the World Economic Forum, but you never know. There might be people who are completely out of the news and have never
sure,
even heard of the World Economic Forum. What
sure.
would you say the World Economic Forum is for people who don't know?
So the World Economic Forum is a non-governmental organization that's set in Switzerland that has been going since the 1970s. And what they are, they're very similar to other organizations such as the Club of Rome, the Trilateral Commission, who are all NGOs, but they host some of the most powerful people in the world that sit around and speak about how to change the world. And what the World Economic Forum focuses on
So are
is
they business owners or are they sort of MPs?
it's from business owners to politicians
Mhm.
to other NGOs. At the World Economic Forum, you've got people like Meta, you've got other journalists like the Wall Street Journal, I believe, are part of them, and you've got big people in collaboration such as the United Nations. So it goes into governmental
Right.
organizations, and they talk about how we should change our world. And they talk a lot about boring stuff such as like climate change and things like that, but they are the forefront of influencing policy around the world.
So
So
are they a not-for-profit organization, or do they make a profit? I mean, what do these,
yeah,
groups, what do they get out of it? Because
so
why would they
they
come together if they don't make something out of it?
of course. So they're hedge funded by so many elites across the world. So Klaus Schwab being the head honcho, and he has other people underneath him, such as Yuval Noah Harari, who is an author, but they all are called agenda contributors to this NGO. And because they have partnerships with the most powerful businesses in the world, and partnerships with governmental organizations such as the United Nations, which shape policy across the West, you have this very powerful organization. It's almost like one big lobbying group,
Right.
but really what it is, I call it corporate grooming. And what I mean by that is that they get people such as Tony Blair. They've had Boris Johnson there, who actually put a ban on MPs to go for a while, but then that was lifted. Keir Starmer went there recently. They have all the most powerful people that you could think of go to these conferences and meetings and discuss about policy. And a lot of things such as the Sustainable Development Policy, which is you probably have heard of it. It's called Agenda 2030,
Yeah.
which is all about net zero. And it's about weaning people off of private ownership of vehicles, motor vehicles. And it's all climate change and net zero related. And, you hear the whole meme about you'll eat the bugs and things like that. They want to change diet. They want to change all sorts of things from culture, economics to all sorts. And they have the power to do this, but it's through influence. That's why they have all these powerful people go to these summits every year to almost groom them into trying to change policies for their vision.
Okay, so Klaus Schwab is like the president of this group of people.
Yes, the chairman, yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So who is he for people who don't know?
So he's a German. I think he was an engineer back in the day, but he was under very powerful people such as Henry Kissinger, who recently died at 100 only the other day, and he was the U.S. Secretary of State, I believe, at some point during. Oh, my history is really quite terrible. During like Vietnam and during
Right.
Cambodia, during all these times when the US was really hyper into the foreign policy stuff. Obviously, they still are, but anyways, so this guy has been setting up things such as the Club of Rome, the World Economic Forum. Even he was basically the brainchild of all of these big organizations, and who he is. There's some dodgy things in his past that suggests that he's not a very nice character. He did have ties. Let's say that he had ties with a German political party between 1939 and 1945. So there's been
For censorship reasons, we won't say, but
won't say that word.
gather.
Apologies. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's had ties with not very nice people, but
Right.
he was very much involved in the early expansion or the conception of the European Union as well. So it all sort of interlinks. So he's the one. He's the one that we should kind of be looking at and saying, okay, well, what's the next move?
Yeah, and it's interesting that you describe him as kind of like a brainchild of it all, because when you mention all of these different groups and things that he's been affiliated with over the years, and then you look at his position now, speculation here, but it would seem logical to suggest that perhaps that isn't quite an accident that he has been in the
Yeah.
position that he is in. Definitely something that I'm going to be digging into, the history of
Good.
Klaus Schwab. Who is he? Where did he come from?
Sure, definitely. It's at the end of the day, the man is still the chairman of this big NGO. There's a lot of talk that no, they're just like a networking group. They don't do anything, nefarious or anything like that. But really, if you look into it, they are partnered with the most powerful businesses, politicians, other NGOs, and governmental organizations in the world, such as the United Nations. They are partnered with these people. and they help shape Western policy, such as the Sustainable Development Policy, which is all about net zero. It's all about taking you off of private ownership of diesel and petrol vehicles. It's all
Yeah.
climate change focus, which net zero is going to, in the end, impact the little people,
Mm.
not the people who have money and can make, I don't know, can grow big gardens and grow their own vegetables and do all these things and keep themselves sustainable. Whereas us are going to be poor, miserable, and well, we'd have to give up a lot more freedoms. And, from the past couple of years, I've been calling this out about our civil liberties being taken from us.
Yeah.
And that's only part of the jigsaw puzzle. So, it's important to of course talk about an organization such as that.
Yeah, and I'm aware that a lot of people who speak out against the World Economic Forum and other such organizations, people can be very quick to, throw around words like conspiracy theory. Now, I'm a naturally curious person, so I hear the word conspiracy theory and I want to know more. However, I think the majority of people, at least in the older generations, who are very much in the mainstream narrative, they don't really go on YouTube, they watch the news, and to them, they've never had any reason to question it. So, what I would say, I guess, for perhaps some generations that are older than ours who might come across this interview, what leads you to come to the assumption? I'm going to play devil's advocate here.
Okay.
That the World Economic Forum has these malicious agendas at heart. You mentioned the sustainable development agenda 2030. Is Agenda 2030 a new thing? I'm pretty sure I've heard of an Agenda 2020. If so, what did that look like and what were the ramifications from that? So are there any examples where you can sort of pinpoint, well, they've behaved maliciously in this case, or they've done this in this case? Because otherwise, it's very easy for people to go, well, you just sound like a very paranoid person,
Of course. Okay. Klaus Schwab wrote a book called COVID-19, The Great Reset. You can buy it off Amazon if you want. It has in everything within this book is exactly how he feels, what he wants to implement. And this was during the height of COVID. The Great Reset, it's called. That is one of his brainchilds as well, this massive agenda. And what this thing is called, the Great Reset, which I've been talking about since 2020, 2021. What this is a big shift in politics, in economics, in culture, in environmentalism, at all aspects of life. And he details it all like within this book.
Mm-hmm.
Because what it is, he saw the pandemic happen and he jumped on this and said, okay, we have an opportunity here to, quote, reset our world and to go back to either resetting it to a new era. So in his mind, it's the idea of we've gone through this massive crisis and we want to change things that to benefit. Well, he sees it as benefiting everyone, but really it's not, because there are things in there about AI. There are things in there about transhumanism. I'm not sure if you're aware about that, molding artificial intelligence or machines with humans and things like that. There are bizarre things within not only this book, but what he talks about. So I encourage people who think, this sounds like just some crackpot conspiracy theorist. Go and look at what they say. This is all stuff. I'm basically repeating what they are saying.
Yeah.
That's all you need to do. Just go and look at what they are saying and make your own mind up. And you can call it conspiracy theorist if you want, but they're the ones saying it, not me. I haven't pulled this out of thin air. It's all on their website. You can go to their website and just read what sort of stuff they're talking about. You can watch clips of what they are saying or watch full conferences of what they want to talk about. And you can even read literature that both Klaus Schwab and other agenda contributors, they call them, have written and what they would like to do. And it's very much a godless, very extremely hyper progressive mindset of changing the world for what they, in their narcissistic head, believe is the correct route. And it's scary.
And in terms of politics, what you mentioned, that he had these sort of visions for how he wanted to redefine politics. I mean, the first sort of red flag to me as well, they're a non-government organization, so they shouldn't have any kind of plans
True.
for for politics in the first place. But, to try and, I guess, get inside Klaus Schwab's head, what is it that he wants for the political front? You mentioned that they're quite progressive. Is there anything that we've seen in the last few years that you could perhaps argue that he's going, this is brilliant, and we're moving forward? Because I'm sure they surely believe that they're doing a good thing if they're posing as this group of powerful people coming together. Words like sustainable development doesn't really sound too evil, does it?
Yeah, exactly. And that's how they get you. Here's the thing with the World Economic Forum, with this organization, you have to remember that they are the ones that have set up the pressure. They are the ones. Klaus Schwab, for example, set up something called the Young Global Leaders Scheme, where people from Justin Trudeau to Ardern in New Zealand, who's now obviously not part of New Zealand but has a very pristine job. I think Boris Johnson was part of it too at one point. There are people from all over the world. Sayana Marin from Finland, who's obviously enjoying a bit of a break at the minute. There are all these people that were part of this scheme. And he once said in an interview or one of their conferences that he was proud that they, quote, penetrate the cabinets.
Wow.
And he was talking about Canada. So he was talking about how he's proud that people from this Young Global Leaders Scheme that he has set up is now part of government, is now part of cabinets across the world. And it doesn't matter whether it's
not
left
democratic at all, is it?
No, it's not. Well, it's annoying because you can, unfortunately, we see it as very unfair because it's not democratic, but they can get around it because it's like a strange loophole. The problem is with it is you now worry or you now sit and think, well, if anyone is just part of this World Economic Forum, whether it be the left or the right of politics, how do I know that you're not just being pressured or you're just bowing down to another master somewhere else that's not part of this country? The biggest thing about Brexit was it was all to do with national sovereignty, and it was to do with our own country putting forward laws instead of Brussels. It wasn't Brussels that were taking control of what we could and couldn't do.
Right.
When you have an NGO like the World Economic Forum that brags about penetrating the cabinets within foreign governments, that to me is just another Brussels. It's another EU, unelected people that has massive influence and massive say within the political realm. And that's why a lot of people have had enough of it. And they're seeing this and saying, well, this is wrong. This shouldn't be allowed. So yeah, but back to the whole, conspiracy theorist, is it that? Is it not that? Just go and read what they say. Don't take it from me. Go and do it yourself. And then you'll find out quickly who they're partnered with, what they say, and what agendas they want to push forward with.
Yeah, absolutely. They're probably going to have to cut this out, but I'm a big Alex Jones fan, and
So am I.
He will sit there on InfoWars, with stacks and stacks of paper in front of him, which is, it's straight out of the horse's mouth. It's from the World Economic Forum, it's there in black and white. But what you Google him, what does it say? Like the world's biggest conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, of course.
He's saying, don't listen to me. I'm literally telling you what's in front of me. My dad, I've showed my dad a couple of clips of him, and I've been like, look at this. And my dad goes, why is he so bonkers? I'm like, Dad, if I was screaming to the world for 20 years, look at this, look at this, look at this. And
you would be haggard and you would be acting like that.
You would be.
Yeah.
I said, I'll probably be a bald, fat man by the time I'm 30. People don't start listening to me. Anyway, I wanted to ask if you've noticed an increase in censorship within the last 10 years. I know obviously we touched on the events of 2020, but is there any other sort of, I guess I'm looking at it like a wave, and obviously 2020 we really hit a peak in the wave of censorship. Is there any other times or events that you think have happened perhaps in recent history or within the last sort of 10 years that you think, how do I describe it? Almost the barriers on information have really come up.
I would say personally, when I noticed personally when things started to ramp up in that respect was 2016,
Okay.
which was the two political earthquakes, and that was Brexit and Trump.
Yes.
But after Trump was elected and after we had Brexit, um, I spoke recently about Michael Schellenberger, a guy, another journalist who's just dropped these documents or from whistleblowers out in the States that say that the UK and the US collaborated with a cyber intelligence program that wanted to crack down and censor people on basically dangerous misinformation. And this was during this was set up straight after Trump was elected, and it was in the White House when Obama was just still there,
Mm.
and he was just about to hand the keys over to Trump. He had a former British intelligence analyst there to say, and he actually said, we must not let this happen again. And so that's when I believe that censorship really started to ramp up. Censorship has always been around, but when it's so blatantly obvious, it was from 2016 onwards. I mean, these two political earthquakes has shaped politics forever. And looking back on the last few years, not only with 2020, COVID's an obvious one where people were being deplatformed and censored just for talking about, I'm not going to say the full
Yeah.
word, but the shot. I think you can say that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But also other things such as war with Russia, Ukraine was a big one as well. But not only did it go through censorship, it went further. It was more about behavioral change. It was more about propaganda as
Mhm.
opposed to censoring people. Now, there is I mean, this is spicy, but there is a military, there is a military, how do I explain this? Forgive me.
That's okay.
There is a military branch within the UK Army called the 77th Brigade. Now, I don't know if you've heard of them.
No.
No. So what they are a non-lethal task force of people who specifically go online onto social media to promote either propaganda or narratives. So they were active all through 2020. They used it to spy on journalists such as Peter Hitchens and various others. And this branch of military,
And how do we know this? How do we know that they were spying on journalists?
because it all came out during
Right.
2021. And you can find various accounts and documents of proof of that, and they've actually admitted it.
Wow.
Um, so from the horse's mouth once again. But this 77th Brigade primarily focuses on its own citizens as opposed to just foreign.
Right.
So that's where it gets quite scary. So we're now seeing in the age of censorship, not only people being deplatformed for wrongthink on
Mhm.
certain social media account or certain social media or video platforms.
Yeah.
Now we're seeing active military grade propaganda or narrative spins to make people almost either A, feel scared to talk about a narrative or talk about something, whether it be Russia, Ukraine, whether it be about anything, to trying to shape or influence behavioral change and make people put their hat or throw their hat to one side, if that makes sense, or to take sides, let's say. And it's quite,
Almost sounds like a form of mind control. I mean, if we,
yeah,
gonna go down the conspiracy route, I've read my fair share.
or like
Um,
MK Ultra and
MK Ultra, exactly what I was gonna say. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. That's been proved, right? That's
Yeah.
not a conspiracy theory anymore, anyway. But yeah, 77th Brigade is all social media focused. They're all very much
And can you
use.
Google the 77th?
Yeah,
Like you can
yeah,
go on there. They have a
yeah,
website.
yeah.
You can.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's all open. So this is the thing, it's all open air. And I think that's what's smart about it is because if you tell someone that at a pub or at a bar or just out and about, if you tell people something like that, they'll go, "Oh, this guy's crazy."
Mm.
If you show people now, even if you show people what's actually happening, or even if you just show people the facts, or look, this is exactly what they're doing and they are admitting it, it's still, you
Yeah.
know, goes over the head. And
That's
that's
why I mentioned MK Ultra as a conspiracy, because even though it's been proven all these years later, and there's evidence upon evidence of exactly what was going down, archive documents have come out, still it will be given that tag.
of course. But yeah, 77th Brigade is the big one, especially in the UK. That's why you saw a lot of bots when you would post something about Ukraine,
Hmm.
or COVID or something like that. You would get floods with bots. Certain accounts that you can see by the date that they were created, if they're very very recent, and they have they follow particular people, or they look for hashtags, or they look for certain words. They'll flood with comments.
I have a question about that actually. I'm not sure if it was there was a lady. She was the Home Secretary. She's just
Suella Braverman.
yeah. I'm not sure. Actually, I think I might be getting confused with an American politician. There was someone who was advocating for everyone online to have some kind of verification, so that
Oh, was that Nikki Haley
that's it.
that's
That's
running?
who
Yeah,
that's
that's
who I'm
running for
getting
president.
confused with.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
I mean, I would imagine if we've got 77th Brigade in the UK, I mean, America is just
Oh, the
essentially the
different.
UK
Yeah, of
overseas. There must be something like that in
course.
America.
Yeah,
How would that work if, say, this Nikki Haley lady came into power and said everything's got to have verification? How would they be able to run those bots? Do you think they'd still do it anyway?
of course. They'd have a way to get around that. Obviously, you've got to remember some laws just don't apply to some people, and you
Yeah.
have to remember that. So anonymity, okay, that's a big one. Like advocating for no anonymity online is one of I would argue one of the most dangerous things ever,
Mhm.
especially for people like me, journalists, who want to either reach out to someone, or if you want whistleblowers, there's no whistleblowers then. That's it, gone. Like that means that you have to put a name to everyone. You could lose your jobs. You could lose so much income. You could just lose your livelihoods from that sort of policy. But it's all geared towards mean things said on the internet.
Exactly.
Oh, please don't say mean things to me on the internet, is what that is.
That's the
It's
front that they're posing it
yeah.
as.
No, that's China level policy. That
Mhm.
is like China level, with WeChat over there or something. I think that's what the app's called, where the government will literally monitor everything that you say. And if you go against the government, you're thrown in prison. Not to say it's going to be that extent, obviously. We're not in those times as of yet, but people are still being thrown to prison for saying mean things on the
Yeah.
internet, which
Yeah.
is insane. I think that's mental. But if you get rid of anonymity, yeah, what a whistleblower is going to do, they'll go underground. They'll go on other, websites like the dark web, and you don't want to be going around that sort of area of the internet. You
Absolutely not.
you want surface level stuff, and for people to trust in other people. But yeah, anonymity, it's actually paramount, especially to journalism. You may not like mean things being said to you on the internet, but that's the
Whatever
internet.
happened to that old saying, sticks and stones may break my
Yeah,
bones, words can never
yeah.
help me. We seem to have forgotten that. On the topic of people getting thrown in jail over things online,
Mm.
I wanted to speak to you about your recent video. I know you obviously shared with me one of your videos that you've done, guys. Absolutely go check it out. It's on Lewis's channel. He says, I asked ChatGPT to dismantle the new government bill. Shocking results. Can you tell everyone a bit about what that is, what you found, and what was so shocking?
Okay, so there's a new bit of legislation that has had the royal assent now, so it's passed, it's
It's
gone,
had it now. I
it's
was
done.
kind of waiting for when that was going to happen.
It's done, it's passed, it's gone
Right.
through. So we're now living in it. So what this is, it's called the Online Safety Bill, and it is caricatured as this safety blanket for people on the internet. And it's we've got to protect children on the internet and all this, and the things that they list within this bill are already illegal. They're completely already illegal. But what actually it does is it grants regulators such as Ofcom, who regulate broadcasts,
Mhm.
so people like Talk TV, GB News, or the BBC, or
Yeah.
people like that, people who regulate them, it now moves to the internet. instead of just broadcast. So what it means is we now live on, whether it be YouTube, whether it be X or Twitter, although it seems to be there's a bit of a fight there,
Mm.
and various other video platforms. It's now moved on to, if the government or Ofcom doesn't like something that you have posted, whether it be a video, whether it be something, in text or something like that, they have the power to put the power back to the publisher, meaning that they'll start fining the publishers until it's either removed or throttled or anything like that. And what I decided to do, because it's a 300,000 word document. And I thought, I haven't got time to go through that with the legal jargon. So I put it through ChatGPT, the AI tool that you can use in
A
the
whole piece of legislation.
whole of it. I put everything through it and asked it to translate it and give me key points about it. And then once it had analyzed it, I would ask it questions about the bill. And there were things like, I asked it, well, what does it define as hate speech, for example? And it would come back saying, there is no clear definition of hate speech. So it could mean various things. And it would say about, well, whether the content might cause distress and stuff like that, which is so
What
subjective.
constitutes
How do
distress.
you measure that? How do you measure is someone distressed? Like if someone is distressed by a video, like unless you're in a hospital all wired up and they were counting the stress levels. No, that's not going to happen. You're in your own home. Like, what are you doing? Anyways, so I ran it through, and if you get the chance, definitely go and watch it because the results were very shocking. But yeah, we're going to see a new era now of regulation from the government and Ofcom, and we're going to see a big shift, I think, in how we consume and how we view our media. Now, there are a few media platforms that seem to be, at least pushing back towards this. Rumble being a big one, and X, or formerly known as Twitter, is actually, actually trying to push back on at least something. But yeah, I recommend going to check that out. But it's it's a mad one.
Yeah, that's really, really concerning. I guess obviously the benefit that a company like X has is obviously, their HQ is outside of UK jurisdiction, so they can't exactly, how you would hope that they can't exactly fall prey to these kind of laws. But it is really concerning when you have laws like this in place. And people will often argue, again, to play devil's advocate,
Mm.
oh well, you could have people going online and inciting violence, things like terrorism, and it
It's all illegal anyway.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's important to look at what's being said and to always sort of ask what's just below the surface, because on the surface they will always paint it as some kind of benefit to you.
Yeah.
When, like you say, the stuff that we're all sort of would be worried about and think, oh, this law is great for, is
Mm.
already illegal anyway. So then that would lead you to question, well, what's the need for this law in the
Yeah.
first place? I believe Russell Brand also did a similar kind of video on the government safety bill, and he raised a couple of the same concerns. And well, look at his current situation at the moment. It's
Yeah.
continuing to unfold. But I'm yet to hear any real progress in terms of the actual court and criminal system with
Well,
regards
this
to
is
that
this is
case.
it as well. And to add on that, like when that all happened, a government minister from the UK reached out to Rumble to purposely try and get him deplatformed and to stop advertisers and to stop collaborations with him. That's a government minister trying to do that. Now, that was before the online safety bill had its royal assent.
Yeah,
So now, if she would have done that after that
yeah.
had gone through, probably would have maybe had more of a chance to do it. So that's what I think is really wrong. And like with Russell Brand, I don't know what the update is on his current
It's
situation.
kind of gone quiet. So
It has gone very quiet.
I presume that, considering it's gone quiet, there isn't much to say, because I'm sure if something did come out that was actually substantiative, evidence. Well, it would be all over the front pages, wouldn't it? It would be all over.
Yeah, just have to wait and see, I guess. See what
Yeah,
happens.
it's definitely something I'm actually a big Russell Brand fan.
Oh, really? Okay.
So until I see, the actual decision of the courts, I studied law, and on the first day you get told innocent until proven guilty. So I will stick by that
Fair play.
until obviously there is evidence to suggest otherwise. But it's definitely a trend, especially given the area of the internet that my channel is in. It's definitely a trend that I see that it's again, like you say, this idea of people saying mean things. People seem to think that constitutes a reason to take away someone's livelihood,
Yeah.
constitutes a reason to, you know, yeah, as I say, take away someone's livelihood. Well, hey, I won't get into that conversation today. Another question I wanted to ask you, obviously, we're talking about essentially laws being weaponized, right? Laws that are being weaponized against the people, that are taking people's liberties and freedoms away. Other than the online safety bill, is there anything else you can think of that you think the people ought to know about?
Yeah, there's one called the Communications Act of 2003 that was passed by Tony Blair when he was in power. And what that means, you can look it up for yourself. It means if you possess and send via any form of communications, anything that's, quote, grossly offensive, you can be put in prison and fined for it. So grossly offensive is a big, vague term.
Yeah.
So what constitutes grossly offensive? Memes constitute that. Videos, pictures, text, making jokes. We had someone recently who made a joke about George Floyd and was put in prison for that. And I think he was an ex-cop. I think that made a joke about George Floyd. Yeah, and was thrown in prison. There are many people that have been, threatened with it or fined with it. There was the famous case of another YouTuber called Count Dankula, who's from Scotland, who, as a joke, um, taught his girlfriend's dog to do a 1939 to 1945 salute after he said something very offensive, which I won't say because you'll just get demonetized. So I'm not going to say it, but you can have an idea of what it is. And it would do this salute every time that he said it. And he filmed it, videoed it as a joke, and it quite clearly is a joke, and no one was offended by it until the media got hold of it.
Right.
And he was then dragged through to the European courts and in the end took
Over a dog. I mean, if it was
a
a
dog. Yeah.
child, you could, again, to play devil's advocate, you could perhaps argue, what are you putting into that child's head? And, could that constitute some kind of, inciting violence, things like that? But it's a dog.
It's a joke. It's a dog. A dog doesn't understand what's going on. So they dragged him to the European courts and done it under the Communications Act 2003.
Wow. When was this?
When was this? Oh, this was I want to say 2015.
Wow.
2015, 2014, between 2014 and 2016. Count Dankula, you can look him up. If you put in Count Dankula pug, it all comes up. But
Really
I've interviewed him
interesting.
before. He's a nice guy, very funny. He's a comedian. That's the irony of it. He's a comedian. And yeah, it's mad. These laws, we've had 13 years of quote unquote conservative rule, which isn't conservative, it's more liberal. Both Labour and Conservative are the same party. Just one's got a pride flag over it. And the Conservatives could have easily repealed back what Tony Blair pushed through, because now we live in this surveillance state, dystopian country where now you're being arrested for posting memes on the internet or telling jokes to your friends through WhatsApp and someone rats on you. I mean, it's such a horrific world to live in now. And they could have done so much. They could have repealed this, and nobody would have been in this mess. I think in 2020, I want to say 2021, I think it was then, or maybe just before that. No, it must have been before that, 2019 or something like that. I think in 1 year they recorded 120,000 or 130,000 non-crime hate incidences, meaning that you might have said something offensive on the internet, or you might have caused an offense on the internet, and that goes against your record. But it's not, you're not going to be prosecuted for it. You're just on record. But that still affects your, is it DBS checks?
Right. Yeah.
It still affects these checks. It still affects people getting jobs. And they recorded, yeah, it was around 120 to 130,000 people in 1 year in
Wow.
the whole of the UK. I think it was the UK. I'm not even sure if it was England specifically, but I think it was the UK. So, yeah, we live in weird times right now.
That's really, really crazy. It's almost like there's like a watch list. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah, it's what it is. It's a watch list. Yeah, you could argue that. Yeah,
Wow. That is so shocking. I didn't realize that, because obviously when you're looking at things like DBS checks and people getting jobs, and we're talking about a time where, you know, people are increasingly scared to speak out against what the general status quo is. And when you
cool.
hear things like that, it's, it's very easy for us in what we do to kind of sit here and go, don't take it, speak up, speak
Yeah,
out
yeah.
against it.
Oh, yeah. It's not as easy as that.
But
No.
it's not as simple as that, is it? For everyday people, you're looking at mums, dads with children, and they can't afford to just lose their job like that. And that's why it's so important that companies like X, companies like Rumble, do provide some kind of pushback to all of this,
Yeah.
because ultimately that's people's only hope, really. I would love to encourage people to talk about these things and not feel afraid. But if I'm being completely honest, I can understand
Oh, I
why
can
they are.
understand you. Yeah. Sometimes, there's a motto like be brave and just, get in trouble,
Mhm.
but the thing is, it's not as easy as that because, like you said, people have livelihoods now. And when you live in a world where you're not allowed to speak, you're not allowed
Can't
to,
even make jokes.
you can't even make jokes. If you can't even make jokes in a society, I mean, that's like Soviet era,
Mhm.
like society where you can't even make jokes, on in certain realms.
Well, we've
But
just had all of this. I did a brief reaction to it a couple of days ago. I'm sure you've heard of the Matt Rife incident.
the Matt Rife incident,
So Matt Rife, he's a comedian that blew up on TikTok. I think the ladies are rather fond of him, and that's what sort of blew him up. He's a funny guy as well. But I'm not going to beat around the bush. It's pretty clear what blew him up.
right? He's a good-looking dude.
He's a good-looking fella, and I think that always helps on the internet, doesn't it? We know that definitely. But yeah, he basically made a joke. He did this Netflix special, and I watched the Netflix special when it came out, and it was within the first couple of minutes of the show. He says, I went to this restaurant with my friend, and the host who came and greeted us, it was like a dodgy area that they went to. And in this restaurant, the host that came and greeted them to sit them to the table had a black eye. And he's kind of like, I can't believe that this is the girl they've got on the front of the, restaurant coming to greet people. And his friend says to him, well, I feel bad for her. Like they should put her in the kitchen or something, because she's got
Okay.
a black eye. And he goes, well, I feel like if she could cook, she wouldn't have that black eye.
Oh,
It's
right.
tongue in cheek, right?
Yeah, yeah,
But it's obviously a joke. And I just think, have you guys watched Ricky Gervais? Have you
yeah,
guys
yeah.
watched Jimmy Carr? But people are calling left, right, and center for him to be cancelled. Women on TikTok are furious. I really couldn't believe the response. And I actually think he handled it rather well, actually. He put on his story the next day after all this backlash. If any of my jokes have ever offended you, here's a link to my official apology. And when you click the link, it goes to a special needs website for special needs helmet.
Right. Okay. So
Again,
down.
obviously a
Yeah.
joke, but we need to be
That's good.
able to
No,
have
it
jokes.
is. No, it is good. I think if you're making a joke, it's a joke. People know it's a
You
joke.
don't
They
like
want to
it.
find something, but you just don't like it. Like the only way you don't apologize, you double down. And I
No.
think that's the only way, because that breaks the taboo.
Mhm.
People are crying out. There's a very famous podcast I forgot what they're called. It's of a guy that's Chinese descent, and it's a ginger guy, and they like, I think it's called like Bad Friends or something
Okay.
like that. But they're clips that come out. I mean, they go viral all the time, but they're being so horrible to each other and making these quite obviously, it's I think it's like racial jokes between each other.
Right.
And it's obvious what they're doing, but people love it because I think we live in a time now where you're just there's so much containment within the comedy sphere, and people don't actually quite get when you're joking or when you're being satirical,
Mhm.
and that it doesn't actually hurt anyone. Nobody's hurt from jokes, really. Like if you know that it's a joke, quite
Yeah.
clear.
And if it's like coming out of a comedian's mouth, of course it's a joke.
Surely they should be allowed to make jokes for crying out loud. They're comedians. Like,
No, this is something I'm increasingly noticing is comedians being targeted. And I think it was Joe Rogan who said, once comedians can't make jokes anymore, we're in a I think it was in a podcast actually with Jimmy Carr. He said,
yeah.
when you get to a point where you can't make jokes anymore, we're really headed for troubled times. I'm actually at the moment trying to find a comedian to do an interview like this with,
Oh,
to discuss, are we losing humor?
yeah.
Because and it really links with this subject as well because it's the kind of increased in almost tyrannical measures that we're seeing where day by day I just see the book 1984 coming more and more to life, the idea of thought control, and just constantly feeling like someone's watching, or if you speak out of line in a certain way that you're going to get thrown in a prison somewhere. We're not at those times. Yeah, obviously you mentioned countries like China where you hear of these things are really real and happening, but at one point or another, places like China and say Soviet times, they may well have been in a similar position to where we're at now, so we can't be ignorant to these little red flags that are popping off here and there. They are little red flags for the moment, but if they go unwatched, they will get bigger and bigger, and then we might find ourselves
Yeah.
in very troubled times. Um, I just wanted to sort of end the conversation today with just sort of picking your brain from your particular journey of life. I wanted to ask, what are some memorable stories that you've covered during your time as a journalist? If you had to sort of put it down to the most important ones that you think have happened, or the funniest ones, the most outrageous ones, what pops to mind for you?
It's the Dutch Farmer Rebellion is the biggest one
Okay.
because I was there originally going for a week to cover to go and meet with farmers in rural areas of the Netherlands
Mm.
with a colleague who was a friend, still is obviously. And I remember we got to a week in, we had so much good content. We got to speak to so many different people and follow loads of protests, and just to be embedded within the farmers and like what they did and what they were speaking out against. We ended up staying for 3 weeks instead of one.
Oh
And
wow.
yeah, we just kept pushing it back. And that was probably the best journalism I think I've done today. That's and it's the most memorable because it was funny. I had good company. We had an editor back at home who was taking on a lot of the weight from what we were filming. We made a documentary about it afterwards, which you can find on YouTube. And I just journalism now, especially citizen journalism, it's crying out for people who want to just get involved, go to places, and just point a camera and tell people what is happening on
Mm.
the ground. And to be able to do that and to be like behind, like we helped it grow internationally. That was just a national event that happened, and we made that international. Fox News got the camera guy on and done a hit piece with, or not hit piece, sorry, a hit with him. We had so many different media outlets that just wanted to pick the story up and push it out there. And I got to meet the most interesting people. So that one stands out for me.
And where can people find that documentary?
So you can find that if you type in Lewis Brackpool onto YouTube and then put Dutch Farmer Rebellion, you can
Okay.
find it there, and you can find all the reports there. That was well over a year. I think it was a year ago, or maybe 2 years ago. No, it must have been a year and a half ago. It can't have been 2 years. No, time just flies too quickly. But yeah, that was my most memorable one, and I'm hopefully making some documentaries in the future covering so many different subjects, but I can't say anything just yet. So we'll have to wait and see for that.
No, people definitely have to go subscribe to your channel and find you on the various media outlets so that we can definitely stay tuned for that. Just to end today, I don't want to leave people feeling sort of, all of these things are happening, everything's a lie. What can I do? What can I do?
Yeah.
What in this time right now, where are we? We're December 2023. Inevitably, we know there's a lot going on in the world right now, especially in the Middle East. And inevitably there will be more stories in 2024. Heading into 2024, what are the top sort of narratives that you think people should keep an eye on, and perhaps take things with a pinch of salt and keep your eyes peeled to see what's below the surface?
I would say censorship is definitely one. The erosion of free speech. I mean, it's near enough about to be closed on the UK. So definitely keep an eye out for that. America, obviously, you've got a presidential election coming up at some point. So keep your eyes peeled on that. I think narratives as well spilling through Europe. Whether it be through elections, whether it be through people being put in positions of power. I don't think, I have a feeling, I don't think we're going to see another 2020 for a long time.
Okay.
So I wouldn't have thought that something might happen. I could be wrong. But I'll tell you what will ramp up, and that's climate change. That will ramp up massively. The narrative surrounding climate change is just the beginning. It's going to be put into overdrive soon, and it's already in overdrive, but it's going to be put up another notch. So, yeah, I'd say climate change, elections within Europe, America, and of course, free speech in Britain is my three, I would say.
Amazing. Yeah, guys, definitely go find Lewis on all different social media platforms. He mentions obviously citizens journalism is something that we're not seeing anymore, and we need it. We need people we can trust for journalism. And I say it all the time, mainstream media is not something you can trust for good, honest journalism. And I've been a fan of Lewis and what he's doing for a while now. And I can definitely say that he is a source that you can trust and that you should definitely be watching. So Lewis, where can the people find you?
Thanks, Christine. So you can find me on X, Lewis_Brackpool, or just Lewis Brackpool, I believe, but just put my name in, it will come up. Instagram and YouTube and Telegram as well. I am on Rumble, and I think that automatically posts. So pick your poison, and you'll find me.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me, Lewis. I'm definitely going to be digging into this Communications Act and the 77th Brigade because sounds like something that's calling my name. So guys, make sure you like the video on your way out. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Go subscribe and follow Lewis. And of course, stay tuned to my channel for more In Conversations. And perhaps a Debunking the Lunacy episode soon on all of this Communications Act and 77th Brigade stuff, because I am intrigued. And when I'm intrigued, I will dig and I will provide you guys with that digging. So thank you so much, Lewis, for joining me, and everyone else, I shall see you very soon in the next one.
Thanks for having me. Thank you.